Okay, welcome back to time management. I understand that you have gone to the first lecture already, so we're going to review a little bit about time management, how you can do it, how it is effective for us, especially as sign language interpreters. And so I want to first of all draw the chart. Let me make sure that's a dry erase. You are familiar with this chart, and you know that there are four quadrants, being the first, second, third, and the fourth quadrant. And so let's talk a little bit about what each one of those mean. When we talked the last time, we understand that the first one was of high importance and high urgency, meaning whatever's in that first quadrant is important and needs to be done urgently or quickly. The second one is what we had talked about being the planning stage, what we need to do. Actually, in the second one, we should do more planning of doing more strategizing, if you will. And then, of course, then there's the third one where we kind of think things are important but not urgent. And then the fourth one is kind of something that we think it's of high importance and not very urgent. And so we are somewhere in each one of these, and we agreed that a lot of us spend most of our time in that very first quadrant, meaning that maybe our jobs, for one, we think that everything we do is of high importance and we have a high urgency, meaning that it has to get done. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of us spend too much time in that very first quadrant, which causes us to burn out or get to the point where it kind of shoves us into that fourth quadrant, which means this is the area where we will do a lot of things to keep us busy to make it look like we're working, like checking your emails, gossiping, talking to other people, keeping ourselves busy so that we don't really have to deal with the stuff that quadrant one requires of us. The second quadrant we talked about is that where we do a lot of planning, strategizing, prioritizing our time, trying to figure out what it is that we really need to do with our time. I know there are a lot of people who call themselves busy, but their busy work tends to be in this fourth quadrant where they're on the internet, they are surfing the net, trying to keep themselves busy to get out of this first one. Maybe somebody who is kind of burned out, kind of at the point where they really don't care about their job. You may see them in here. And those are the people that, if they spend too much time in that fourth quadrant, end up getting fired. And so we've got this high importance, high urgency. And number three here, you might find yourself, that's where you're going to be having your meetings, things that you have to do for your job. But what we want to focus on today is how to keep myself not quite in that number one and maybe moving myself to the number two position, or the number two quadrant. And definitely keeping ourselves out of this fourth quadrant where we become just somebody filling the seat and not somebody that's really doing the work that's required of them. These are people that, they don't volunteer to be in committees. They just are there. And those are the kind of people you just don't really want to be on your team. So in high urgency, a lot of times we create things of high urgency. The one way is because we just put things off. We put it off until the very last minute. We need to, in planning, we have to look at the work that we have to do and try to figure out, where does this belong in this whole quadrants, in all these quadrants? Where does this particular work belong? Is it of high importance? Should it go in number one? There are certainly many things that have to be done on time, and they are urgent. Maybe a report. It could be an overnight report. Although if you have a report that's due in a month, and you put that in number four, where you just kind of put it off and put it off and put it off, and then before you know it, it's due the next day and it has become urgent. Those are the things. Those are procrastination, putting things off that, employers just don't really appreciate. So how is it, can I manage my time? So again, we talked about that second quadrant where we say we have to look at what we have to do in a day. If you're employed, you probably have a routine, something that you do routinely, things that have to be done every day. And then there are things that just kind of pop up. Sometimes there are things that are of urgent nature, and sometimes they're just things that your boss can say, hey, I need this done sometimes this week. Maybe getting yourself a diary and listing all the things that you have to do, and maybe making some kind of a code. Putting maybe like U for urgent, I don't know, letters that stand for something so that when you look at it, you can figure it out. One person that I really like the way he has planned these things is the Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has a whole, all this material that you can buy. Now, it can be very costly, but the nice thing about it is you buy a notebook, and then every year you just buy the filler. But he has it where there can be codes, and you can have the diary, you can list things of importance, things that are not important, so that you know where they go on here. Because I can tell you that if you don't keep track of how you use your time will keep track of you. In other words, you will not know, you won't be an effective worker. You'll be trying to catch up, when in fact if you kind of stay ahead of the game, then you can keep your time very well spent. Again, in that planning stage of number 2, this is the best place to be. We know we all have number 1. If you have a job, we all have the number 1s. But in number 2, this is the time for us to plan, spending my time planning my time, rather than trying to figure out how am I going to get this done, shuffling papers all over your desk, trying to focus on one thing, and you just know you got so many things that you're so overwhelmed that you don't know what to do. I personally have read several of Stephen Covey's books, and it's an effective tool, I think, especially if you're going to be in any kind of management. You not only manage your time, but you're going to have to manage your employees' time, making sure that you give them work or assignments that they have to get done, and what kind of employer you would be if you are always making your employees feel like it's high urgency and it has to be done right now, of high importance and high urgency. They're going to burn out. You're going to burn them out. You need to give them time to be able to do the job effectively. If you don't give them the right amount of time that they need, they're going to be turning their work into you, as some call half-assed, not complete, and you're going to have to probably end up doing the work over yourself. So that's why I say make sure that if you have something that's high importance and high urgency for your employees, make sure you give them plenty of time to get that done. If you are finding yourself in this number 1 and you find yourself so burned out and overwhelmed, and you're in that number 4 where you find yourself doing a lot of gossiping and being on Facebook while you're at work or whatever, you better take a look at that rather closely, because at this point, I'm telling you, employers are really keeping an eye out on what people are doing on their Facebook. And if they can see that you've posted it during work time, that may cause you a little bit of problems. I mean, it could even cause you to be fired. So be especially careful with that. Make sure you check out the Stephen Covey books. Look at the time management. Look how they divide the plans that they have of importance, high and urgency, not importance, low urgency. just see how he does that, because I know that time management for interpreters is especially important. And the other thing is if you're not keeping track of what you're supposed to be doing and where you're supposed to be going, you probably won't be a very busy interpreter after long, because people are going to think, you know, they can't remember when to show up to assignments, or they're late, or whatever. Will definitely be a hindrance to you as an interpreter. So this is the quadrants that I want you to take a look at. I want you to figure out where your time is, and I think I especially want you to focus on that number 2, on planning your time out and staying out of the quadrant number 4, where it's just using your time and not effectively. So next week when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what you wrote, what you have written down, and talk about how you use your time, and see how we can use our time much more effectively.